and welcome to Ivory Blush Roses. My name is Lisa. Today we're going to be stitching on rickrack using buttonhole stitch. This is the 6th video in this series on stitching rickrack to a crazy quilt project. If you'd like to watch the previous episodes, I'll leave a link to the playlist in the description box below. I'm so glad you're here today. Let's get stitching. I have my usual tools available. We have Bohin Crewel embroidery needles in a size 7. I'm using DMC embroidery floss now. I often keep mine wrapped on a bobbin. I have my little scissors, and then I've got my needles that are pre-threaded, and I have my rickrack basted onto this sampler piece. We're going to be working on probably 5 of these today. We have 5 different variations we're going to work with buttonhole. Let's get started. For this very first one, we're going to use just a really basic buttonhole stitch to attach this piece of rickrack to the sampler piece. I find for me buttonhole stitch works best if I start on the left, and that might be because I'm right-handed. You may find that it's slightly different for you. This one is just going to be a really simple one, and I'm going to do it on the bottom side here because I think we're going to actually do a different one on the top side. We're going to do just a straight buttonhole stitch, and I'm going to make really short legs coming down on this because I don't have a lot of room. And we're going to take a little stitch into each tip of the arch, catch our thread, and keep that going. This is a way to attach one side of the rickrack. As we get near the end of this, my work is having to sit a little farther away from me, and personally, I find that a little harder. It's one of the reasons that many crazy quilters don't use a hoop or an embroidery frame. So we're going through the point on the rickrack and catching our thread. If you were trying to attach your rickrack, you might be combining this with another method because this isn't really going to keep the rickrack from flopping around. If you didn't already have it basted on, this edge would be loose. Catch this end here and go down. So there's one way of attaching rickrack using buttonhole stitch. It's really simple. Now you could easily do that on both sides of it, and that could be quite interesting. But we're going to attach one using a long and short buttonhole, and we're going to go back the other way. So I'm going to turn it around, and we're going to actually start in the valley this time. Now we're going to go to the valley and make the next one. And I'm coming out the same distance, so I should end up with a relatively straight line across here. And now we're going to the peak. Now we're going to go down to the valley and the peak. This gives a completely different appearance, and I actually really like this one. You'll notice I say that a lot. I do like a lot of these stitches. And now that I've played around with stitching them on my sampler and can see the possibilities, there's a greater chance that I might consider using them in the future. Now you can certainly stab stitch this, and that might help you get your straighter line. Just remember to come up through your stitch and pull the tension nice and taut. I'm going to go down. And so we're just going to keep doing that all the way across. Make sure you're pulling your tension tight enough so it's even all the way across, because that will help you maintain your spacing and it will look neater in the long run. So there we have our regular single buttonhole, and then we have the alternating where it's a long and a short based on the rickrack. So this one I think really helps show off the rickrack. I actually just kind of like the combination of them together. One of the things that people really like to do with buttonhole stitch is to make fans. We're going to do a fan going across the peak of the rickrack. For this one, we actually start off by making a lazy daisy. I think I want to make a 4-spoked one, so that lazy daisy is really going to act as one spoke on this. So we're going to come up. Here's my second spoke. You could do as many spokes as you want to on this. And then down. And then I'm going to come up. I made my lazy daisy and left it kind of fat. Now I'm going to come up through it a second time. And to me, I think that way is a little harder, but it may look nicer in the end. So it just depends on which way you want to try doing it. And then we're going to go down. So let me try that one again, just because I felt like I didn't make that real clear. So we're going to make a lazy daisy, but I'm going to come up the first time on the far left side of it. But instead of pulling it tight at this point, I'm going to go down, and that catches the lazy daisy. And now I'm going to come up where I want the next spoke to be, go through the lazy daisy a second time, and then I can proceed from there. So it's just a slightly different way of doing it. Now somebody out there might have a better trick. Let's go back and do one that just starts with a plain lazy daisy at the beginning. So I'm going to pull it really tight. I want it to look like just a single spoke. Now we're going to make spoke number 2, spoke number 3, and spoke number 4. So it probably looks better this way, but if you need a faster, easier way to do it, you can do it this way. Let's try doing more spokes. Now on this one, I'm going to start it out here in the center a little bit. And I am going to try doing the better, not the easy method. So we're going to leave a little space. We're going to go down. I'm going to come up. So we're going to do a 5-spoke one, and this time we're going to have a vertical right in the center. So that's 1, 2, 3 spokes. I want to come straight out the top. And it'll just be a slight difference from the others, but it allows you to do slightly different things. Again, more spokes, it would be easier on larger rickrack. So you can see the difference between them. You could have sort of a little 4 one here, and then we have the 5. Now I'm running low on thread, so we're going to be ending this off here probably before I get too far and getting a new thread. So start with our lazy daisy. This comes close enough to the center. We can actually have those join here, I think. I think that would look nice. So if we're going to do that, we could actually thread underneath that last spoke if we're going to join them together like that. My threads have gotten out of tension with one another, so I need to kind of get them back in. It's one of the reasons I like working with pearl cottons. I don't have to worry about things like this. There we go. Now we're even. Okay, now we're going to come up straight in the center. I'm going to try stab stitching this one just because my thread is running short and I want to make sure we're getting it as even as we can. And so because we're going to join those, I'm going to come up right in the center. And I'm going to go down because I need to start from down here in the middle. And that's going to be a good spot to tie off my thread. If I can do it, I much prefer tying off in between a pattern change rather than tying off in the middle of one. So here's our next thread, and we're going to come up again down here in the center. And this we're going to weave through under the spoke, and if your needle is too sharp, use the back end. And now that's already caught, and we can just continue on. So 1, 2, third spoke right in the center. Turn your work as you need it to make it work for you. Sorry, I know I'm getting my hands in the way with this one. And I pulled that too tight. So if I pull it too tight, loosen the leg. And we're going to go one more coming up in the center. You may be able to tell buttonhole is not my favorite stitch. It's not one that I do a lot. I love the impact of it, but I don't love stitching it. I think we all have our stitches that we really enjoy and the ones we avoid. So I'm not as comfortable with it. I'm not as at ease stitching it as I am with some of the others. So again, I'm going down at the end, catch that one in, come up at the center, catch that last leg. Make sure if you're using embroidery floss, catch all strands. Now make leg 2, leg 3, which is right in the center, leg 4, and leg 5. Now you can see the two different ones. So you'll notice they've got 4 spokes but 3 spaces, and they're detached from one another. And then we did 5 spoke or 4 space buttonhole, but these are all attached together. And so they each have a slightly different appearance. We're ready for the next one. So this one, instead of sitting on the rickrack, we're actually going to put it so it sits above the rickrack. I'm going to put just a little tiny catch stitch here, and we'll see if that works any better. And then we're going to be linking them like we did down here. I think this might make a neater appearing buttonhole. I like it when we have that spoke coming up in the middle. So we're going to do 5 spoke, 1 in the middle, 1 over here, and I can tell you right now this is not even, and it's probably because I didn't stab stitch it, so I need to do that. So on this one, when I make this last one, yeah, see, that's really wonky. I'm going to stab stitch a straight up vertical stitch, and I'll show you why here in a moment. So now we're going to come over to the next valley, come up in the middle, and now I'm going to go through that vertical stitch. Actually, we're still going to go through that other one, I think. I think it will fit better. I need to have in mind the shape I want for this. This might be one of those spots where you take a marker. I'm going to use the air disappearing one, and I'm going to mark just a little arch from point to point. Now if I wanted to be really exact, I could get out a template. But if I'm having trouble keeping my lines where I want them, that's a good time to mark. I'm trying to always come in that same center stitch. And now I know exactly where I'm coming up. Center, and we're going to come straight up on that line. Center. And with buttonhole, you got to pull your tension just right. And we're going down again in that center. And this time we're coming up on the point or the hilltop or the mountain or peak, whatever you want to call it. Now I'm going to go straight down back into the rickrack there. And now we're going to come up in the valley. Oh, I could feel that. So a lot of times when you get these little twisty knots, just a little pull will pull it out. And then remember, we're going to catch our last spoke of the last one. Oh, and I don't need to go twist through it. And now we're going to repeat that whole process. And I'm finding that having that line really is helpful. Let's try stab stitching it. And then coming up in the peak of the next one. Again, check my tension, just pull that tension through a little bit, even it out, and right back down through the rickrack. And coming up in the valley, can't find the spot I want, there we go. Catch my spoke. As I'm thinking about this, let me just mark this to show you. I know I want a stitch here, and so I'm going to divide what's left in half on either side. And if you need to mark that, then mark it. And that might make it easier if you're having a hard time with these. So now we're going to come up on that center one. Make sure I'm going through my loop. And we'll see if that helps me make these more even in appearance. Coming back up on that quarter mark, back down in the center, and this time coming up in the center of the peak. And again, adjusting that tension. I often find for myself with buttonhole stitch is it's the tension that holds it that's what's important in keeping it all nice and even. So if it's not coming, then it means I've got it too loose somewhere or too tight somewhere else. Just trying to adjust that. And as I've said, this, oops, forget what I'm doing here. I'm going to catch that last spoke. That buttonhole has not been my favorite stitch. A while back I polled to see what people's favorite stitches were, and buttonhole did come out pretty far down the list, if I remember right. But you can do some amazing things with it. And spread that out. So it's coming, but I'm definitely not as fast with this one as I am with some of the other stitches, as you can see. I love the impact of it, and with this one, the way it follows along, it's got a really interesting appearance. You can imagine if you did that on both sides, you've really added some lacy scallops to that rickrack. So it'll probably take me longer to do this one seam with these fans on it than all the other ones we've done on here combined, just because I am slow with this one. I think I've mentioned before, I am not a fast stitcher, so people often ask how come I don't make more stuff, and it's because I'm not fast. I like to take my time, and I like to make sure it's coming out the way I like it. I'd rather take my time and be slow and have something I'm proud of than trying to do it too fast and not being happy with it. Well, I can't get in the right spot on that rickrack. So, where's my thread? I've lost my thread. There we go. If somebody is watching this who has more experience doing buttonhole fans than me, and you have some tips or tricks, I would love to hear them. Because as you can see, I obviously struggle myself a little bit with this one. But don't let being not as confident in something keep you from doing it. For me, I know a lot of times it's making the effort with these hard ones. It's another reason to have this stitch sampler so that I don't have to worry about it not looking great on here. I've tried, I've learned, I've practiced, and sometimes that's the biggest reward of doing something like this. I hope that maybe this will encourage you to start one. If nothing else, just to try and play with some of these new things or things that you have a harder time with. Just part of the process. working from this side of the rickrack. I'm finding that a little easier. Okay, and we're going to call that good. They look so similar, but the rickrack appearance is very different. Now, if you've used that purple disappearing ink, it will disappear in the air, or it also will disappear with water. A little bit of moisture will go a long way. I live in Colorado where our average humidity is usually less than 20%. And so it sometimes takes these marks a long time to go away. But if you're in a more humid climate, they may be gone by the time you stitch toward the end of your seams. I had one other idea. Let's play with that one. This time I'm going to put a little catch stitch at the top that we're going to be stitching through here in just a moment. So I'm not going to pull it super tight. I'm going to start with my needle coming up down here at the bottom. I'm going to stitch through that catch stitch. We're going to work our way along the rickrack. So I want to think about putting a stitch upright, a stitch in between, a stitch upright. This one is really sort of our one in between. Now we want to go our one upright. So that first one is probably not quite the right placement. We're going to go halfway on the angle in between. And then we're going to do the bottom one. And you could certainly do this one either direction. You could decide that you wanted your bottom stitch, this stitch here on the bottom, or you can have it on the top like I'm doing here. It could go either way. A vertical, the middle of the diagonal, vertical, the middle of the diagonal. Make sure you're untwisting and pulling your thread up periodically. Vertical. This one almost gives the appearance of fans, but it's definitely a different type of stitch. And I can tell where I'm getting my tension off a little bit. I should have pulled this one just a little bit tighter, and this last one a little looser. Some of that's because my thread's getting twisted up, so untwist periodically, because I'm finding that makes a very big difference. So this one goes a little faster. To my way of thinking, this is a vastly different appearing stitch than a lot of the other ones. So it's unique. And again, adjust your tension on these buttonhole stitches as you go. I think I was being more careful back here about getting my cross one perpendicular. So let me try doing a better job of that. I'm learning right along with you. Yeah, that's much better. Well, it was much better till I pulled it too tight. Yeah, when I do that, it does make a big difference. My stitches here on the inside of the arches are pretty close together. Gotta go under that thread, and then we're gonna go out here. For them to look best, the stitches are almost, but not quite, touching. I think we can do one more here. All right. We've stitched on 4 pieces of rickrack, but we've done 1, 2, 3, well, there's really 2 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 ways of attaching it. There's interesting things you could do with that one. You could bring stitches off of those points or off of where the line is outlining it. Either of those would work. So there we have 6 variations on buttonhole stitch to attach rickrack. If you've got any others, let me know. I'd love to hear. And if you have any tips on working buttonhole stitch and making these fans a little bit easier, I would love to hear those as well. I hope you've enjoyed coming along today and watching me struggle with buttonhole stitch. Like I said, it's not my favorite stitch to work. I love the look of it, but it's just not my favorite one to stitch. I hope it's been helpful for you and you've learned something new. We have one more rickrack video to go. And in that video, we're down to the last 5 pieces of rickrack. I think we're going to take a look at ways to use feather stitch to attach rickrack. So stay tuned for that one coming in the near future. Until then, happy stitching, have a beautiful day, and I'll see you in the next video.